A storm-tossed diver surfaced with a corroded lump of bronze. That unassuming find, now called the Antikythera Mechanism, would force historians to rewrite the entire story of ancient science. By the end of this, you will understand how a 2,000-year-old Greek device functioned as an astronomical computer, predicting eclipses and modeling the cosmos with breathtaking precision. We will uncover why its advanced engineering was lost for centuries and what its lonely existence suggests about other forgotten technologies. How does a single object change everything we thought we knew about the past? The Aegean Sea is deceptively calm, its surface a brilliant sheet of blue hiding secrets in the dark below. In the autumn of 1900, a crew of Greek sponge divers sought refuge from a sudden storm near the tiny, rocky island of Antikythera. As the winds calmed, Captain Dimitrios Kontos decided to investigate the local waters. One of his divers, Elias Stadiotis, suited up and plunged into the deep. What he saw in the dim light 60 meters down was not a reef, but a haunting tableau. The silty seabed was a graveyard of marble and bronze, a chaotic field of statues, their stone eyes staring blankly into the abyss. He saw the ghostly outline of a horse, the extended arm of a warrior, and the curve of an amphora. Stadiotos surfaced in a panic, babbling about a heap of naked women on the seafloor. They had stumbled upon an ancient shipwreck of staggering wealth. This was no ordinary merchant vessel. It was a Roman cargo ship, a massive transporter likely carrying the spoils of conquest from the Greek world back to the heart of the empire. Over the next 2 years, with the Greek government's support and using incredibly dangerous primitive diving equipment, the team began a harrowing salvage operation. They battled decompression sickness, limited visibility, and the sheer physical strain of working at such depths. One diver lost his life, and 2 others were permanently paralyzed, the human cost of this early archaeology. They hauled up breathtaking treasures, bronze statues of philosophers and athletes, delicate glassware, and jewelry that glittered as if new. And amidst this spectacular haul, in a corroded, lumpy mass of wood and bronze, they recovered the mechanism. It was not glamorous. It looked like a piece of junk, a calcified lump that had fused with the ship's timbers. To the divers and the archaeologists on the surface, it was an afterthought, a curious oddity set aside while the magnificent statues were cleaned and celebrated. For nearly half a century, it sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, a forgotten puzzle box. No one had the tools or even the conceptual framework to understand what it was. How could they? The accepted history of technology stated that gears of such complexity did not appear until the cathedral clocks of the Middle Ages, over 1,000 years later. This object was a chronological impossibility. It was a secret the deep had kept well, a time capsule not just from the ancient world, but from a strand of ancient genius that the history books had completely missed. The ship itself tells a story. It was a floating museum carrying the physical culture of a conquered Greece to a triumphant Rome. But among the looted art was something far more valuable than any statue, a working model of the Greek cosmos itself. Why was this device on board? Was it a scholar's prized possession, rescued as his world changed? Was it a gift for a Roman patron fascinated by Greek science? Or was it perhaps merely another piece of plunder, its true value understood only by the civilization that created it? The wreck gave us the object, but it offered no manual. The mechanism's true voice was silent, waiting for the 20th century to learn how to listen. For decades, the mechanism was catalogued as a piece of navigational equipment, perhaps an astrolabe. It was a reasonable assumption, a familiar label for an unfamiliar object. The first person to suspect it was something more was the archaeologist Valerios Stais, who examined the crusty mass in 1905. Peering closely, he saw something astonishing, the edge of a gear wheel embedded in the limestone-like corrosion. He suggested it might be an astronomical clock, but his idea was met with polite skepticism. The technology to see inside the lump did not exist, and the idea itself seemed to defy common historical sense. The scholarly consensus of the early 20th century held a very specific view of the ancient Greeks. They were the unparalleled philosophers, the master geometers, the poets and playwrights who laid the foundations of Western thought, but they were not seen as mechanical engineers. Precision gearwork, complex machinery, this was the domain of later eras, of medieval clockmakers and Renaissance inventors. The Greeks thought about the cosmos, the theory went. They did not build machines to model it. This preconception was a powerful filter. It meant that even when evidence of advanced engineering sat right before them, in a museum case, experts could not see it for what it was. The mechanism was trapped twice, first by the sea's minerals, and then by the rigid boundaries of historical understanding. It became an anomaly, a curiosity to be mentioned in footnotes, its gears quietly waiting within their stone shell. This is a recurring theme in how we uncover the past. Our greatest obstacle is often not a lack of evidence, but the strength of our own assumptions about what that evidence can possibly mean. The device was hiding in plain sight, not because it was small, but because the idea it represented was too large for its time to comprehend. It would take a new generation and a series of technological breakthroughs to finally crack that calcified shell and hear the intricate ticking of an ancient mind. The mechanism's secret finally began to whisper in the 1950s to a man uniquely prepared to listen. His name was Derek de Solla Price, a historian of science with a physicist's mind. While others saw a corroded artifact, Price saw a profound mystery, a challenge to the entire narrative of technological progress. He became the device's first true detective, dedicating years of his life to its study. His most crucial breakthrough came from looking not at the surface, but through it. He arranged for the fragile lump to be examined with some of the earliest forms of gamma-ray and X-ray imaging, a revolutionary technique at the time. The scans were revelatory. They peeled back the layers of calcification like opening a book. Inside that unassuming mass was a miniature universe of precision engineering, a dense, three-dimensional arrangement of at least 30 interlocking bronze gear wheels, some with teeth cut finer than a millimeter. This was not a simple tool, it was a machine of breathtaking complexity. Price spent years meticulously analyzing these ghostly images, tracing gear trains, counting teeth, and reverse engineering their purpose. In 1974, he published his monumental conclusion. This was not a clock, he argued, but an analog computer. It was a device designed to calculate, to model the motions of the heavens with mechanical predictability. By turning a hand crank on the side, an operator could advance a display on the front, showing the changing positions of the sun and moon against the backdrop of the Zodiac. It could predict lunar phases and, most astonishingly, forecast eclipses, events of great power and omens in the ancient world. Price's work was the key that unlocked the first door. He transformed the Antikythera mechanism from a curious anomaly into a central, undeniable problem for history. It was no longer a question of if the Greeks had such technology, but how and why and what else they might have built. He reframed the conversation entirely, shifting the focus from timekeeping to cosmic calculation. The device was a physical incarnation of Greek astronomical theory, a working model of a clockwork universe crafted centuries before such an idea was thought to exist. Because of Price, the world could no longer ignore the ticking from the deep. Price's work was the key, but the lock itself was still sealed shut. The ghostly X-ray images of the 1970s were like seeing shadows moving behind a curtain. You knew something complex was happening, but the details remained frustratingly out of focus. The true voice of the mechanism, its instructions and its purpose, was still trapped in layers of corrosion and time. Unlocking it would require a technological leap almost as sophisticated as the device itself. That leap came at the dawn of the 21st century, with the formation of the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project. This was no longer the work of a lone historian, but a full-scale international collaboration of archaeologists, physicists, astronomers, and computer scientists. They brought with them tools that would have seemed like pure magic to the device's original creators. In a clean-room laboratory, the fragile fragments were subjected to microfocus X-ray computed tomography. Imagine a medical CT scanner, but one so precise it could map the internal structure of the corroded bronze in 3 dimensions, down to a resolution finer than a human hair. At the same time, another technique called polynomial texture mapping was used. This process involved taking hundreds of photographic images under raking light from every possible angle, then stitching them together digitally to reveal surface details invisible to the naked eye. The combined data from these scans was nothing short of a revelation. Suddenly, researchers could digitally peel the mechanism apart, layer by microscopic layer, without ever touching the physical artifact. They could rotate virtual gears, trace the paths of pins and axles, and most importantly, they could read, for the first time in 2 millennia, inscriptions hidden inside the crust. Text that had been pressed against other bronze plates for centuries became legible. These were not just labels, they were a user manual. The mechanism began to speak. It named celestial bodies, it provided astronomical parameters, it explained its own functions. The scans revealed a cosmos in miniature, a bronze orrery of staggering ambition. Researchers could now see gear trains with teeth cut at precise angles, differential gears that calculated the variable motion of the moon, and a complex assembly that modeled the irregular orbit of our nearest celestial neighbor. This was not a simple calculator, it was a dynamic simulation. By turning the input crank, you were not just moving pointers, you were animating an entire ancient understanding of the universe. The high-tech lab had done more than just examine an artifact. It had effectively performed an archaeological excavation on a digital scale, recovering not just the object's form, but its intellect. After 2,000 years of silence, the Antikythera Mechanism had finally found an audience that could understand its language. This digital resurrection set the stage for the ultimate question: if we could see it so clearly now, could we ever hope to rebuild it? The digital scans revealed a face of celestial ambition. On the front of the Antikythera Mechanism, 2 grand concentric dials waited beneath a now-lost protective plate, a circular window into the ancient cosmos. The outer ring was a practical anchor to earthly time, a 365-day Egyptian calendar. This was no static list of months, however. A clever pin and slot mechanism allowed the user to manually adjust it, accounting for the extra quarter day each year, keeping this mechanical calendar in sync with the actual seasons. It was a nod to the bureaucratic and agricultural rhythms of daily life. Inside this ring of days lay something more mystical, a zodiac dial, divided into the 12 familiar constellations. This was the path of the ecliptic, the sun's highway across the sky as seen from Earth. Here, science and mythology were fused in bronze. A single hand, likely tipped with a golden sun, moved along this inner dial. Turn the main crank, and this pointer would advance, not at a steady pace, but with the slight speed variations the Greeks had observed in the sun's real motion. On any given date, you could read exactly where the sun stood among the stars, in Virgo or Sagittarius, a direct link between the calendar date and the celestial backdrop. But the sun did not travel alone. A second hand, representing the moon, traced its own complex path. This was the mechanism's masterpiece of engineering. A brilliant assembly of gears, including an ingenious differential gear, modeled the moon's subtle irregularities, its speeding up and slowing down in its orbit. A tiny, rotating black and white sphere on this moon hand even showed the current lunar phase, waxing or waning in real time. Together, these pointers created a living orrery. By setting the device to a future date, a scholar or priest could watch the dance of these celestial markers. The true power, the feature that would have seemed like divine foresight, was eclipse prediction. When the sun and moon pointers aligned on specific, critical points on the Zodiac dial, it signaled the potential for an eclipse. Inscriptions on the device even noted the characteristics of these events, whether they would be solar or lunar, and their likely time and direction. This was not a simple display, it was a computational engine. It took the abstract mathematical cycles described by Greek astronomers, the long, complex calculations of the Metonic and Saros cycles, and translated them into a tangible, turning model. You did not need to be a mathematician to see the harmony of the heavens. You simply turned a handle and watched the universe as they understood it unfold before your eyes. It was a mechanical embodiment of an entire philosophy, a belief in a cosmos governed by orderly, predictable cycles, a clockwork universe crafted a millennium before the phrase was ever coined. The moon's motion presented a beautiful problem to the ancient sky watchers. It was not a perfect, steady companion. Over the course of each month, our celestial neighbor would appear to speed up, then slow down in its path across the starry backdrop. The Greeks called this irregularity the lunar anomaly, a puzzle written in the night sky. To simply model the moon with a single, steadily turning gear would be a lie against the heavens, a crude approximation unworthy of a device that sought to mirror cosmic truth. The engineers of the Antikythera Mechanism faced this challenge head-on, and their solution stands as a pinnacle of ancient ingenuity. Deep within the corroded fragments, modern scans revealed a small, unassuming gear with a secret. At its center was not a simple axle but a clever pin standing upright. This pin slid within a curved, elongated slot cut into a second, overlapping gear. As the first gear turned at a constant speed, the pin engaged the slot, but instead of transferring that constant rotation directly, it introduced a subtle, rhythmic variation. Think of it like this. Imagine a wheel on your car turning at a steady pace, but connected to the axle by a spring that stretches and compresses. The engine's power is constant, but the wheel's speed would gently oscillate. The pin and slot mechanism achieved this same elegant effect purely through geometry. The result was breathtaking. The hand representing the moon on the front dial did not sweep evenly. It accelerated slightly as it moved through one part of the zodiac and decelerated through another, perfectly mimicking the moon's real, observed dance. This was a mechanical simulation of an astronomical truth, a bronze algorithm for celestial irregularity. In a stunning historical echo, this very principle, the mathematical description of a body sweeping out equal areas in equal times as it orbits, would be formalized over 1,500 years later by the astronomer Johannes Kepler as his second law of planetary motion. The Greek engineers had not derived the mathematics, but they had embodied the concept in metal and motion. They observed a pattern in the sky and found a way to make bronze breathe with that same rhythm. This single component moves the mechanism from the realm of a clever calculator into the domain of a true analog computer. It was not just showing positions, it was replicating behavior, capturing the living personality of the moon itself. To stand before a reconstruction and watch that moon pointer subtly hurry and linger is to witness a moment of transcendent connection across the centuries, a shared understanding of cosmic harmony made manifest in craft. If this was the sophistication applied to just one celestial body, what other wonders did the device's back plates hold? While the front displayed the moving heavens, the back of the device held its prophetic power. Flipping the mechanism over revealed a panel of even greater complexity, dominated by two large spiral dials coiled like serpents, each a roadmap to a different kind of time. This was where the computer processed its most critical calculations, transforming celestial motion into practical, earthly knowledge. The upper spiral, known as the Saros dial, was a masterstroke of eclipse prediction. It tracked a cycle of 223 lunar months, roughly 18 years, which the ancient Babylonians had discovered was the key rhythm of eclipses. As a pointer wound its way along this spiral over the decades, it would stop at specific cells inscribed with tiny, cryptic glyphs. These were not just simple warnings. The inscriptions, deciphered from the high-resolution scans, indicated the predicted time of day for the eclipse, whether it would be solar or lunar, and even suggested the likely color of the event based on centuries of observational records. This was astronomical data refined into an omen reader's guide, allowing a priest or astrologer to prepare for a moment when the sun or moon seemed to vanish, an event that could signify divine displeasure or a shift in royal fortune. Below this coiled predictor of celestial drama lay the second spiral, the Metonic dial. This 19-year cycle was the ancient world's solution to a stubborn calendar problem, the fact that 12 lunar months fall about 11 days short of a solar year. The Metonic cycle harmonized them, ensuring that seasonal festivals would recur at roughly the same solar time each cycle. This was the practical heartbeat of Greek society. By tracking this dial, the mechanism's operator could authoritatively set the dates for major pan-Hellenic events, most notably the Olympic Games, which were held every 4 years as part of this greater cycle. With this knowledge, a city could plan the sacred truce, athletes could begin their training, and pilgrims could arrange their journeys years in advance. This back panel fundamentally transforms our understanding of the device. It was not merely a philosopher's toy or a wealthy patron's curiosity. It was an instrument of social and ritual order. In the hands of temple priests, it could schedule sacred ceremonies and interpret divine signs written in the sky. For civic leaders, it anchored the calendar for games, markets, and political terms. It wove the precise, mathematical clockwork of the cosmos directly into the fabric of daily life, governance, and worship. The mechanism was, therefore, both a model of the universe and a manual for navigating it, a tool that connected the predictable cycles of the stars to the unpredictable flow of human history. If this single device served so many vital functions, a haunting question arises: who could have possibly built such a marvel, and where did such sophisticated engineering come from? The true genius of the mechanism is etched in miniature across its surfaces. Modern imaging has revealed over 3,500 individual Greek characters, a tiny, precise script covering every available space on the casing plates and dials. This is not decorative engraving, it is the device's own voice, a comprehensive user manual and astronomical reference guide cast in bronze. The text transforms the object from a mysterious artifact into a working tool, its purpose and philosophy laid bare for the operator to read. These inscriptions explain the complex planetary cycles the machine models, they label the constellations on the Zodiac dial, and they provide critical data points for its calculations. Most fascinating are the detailed parapegma entries, a kind of ancient almanac that links specific astronomical events, like the pre-dawn rising of the dog star, Sirius, to predictable seasonal changes on Earth. The text might note the onset of seasonal winds, the time for sowing crops, or the likelihood of rain. This feature beautifully illustrates the ancient worldview, a deep, tangible connection between the celestial and the terrestrial. The heavens were not a distant abstraction, they were the ultimate calendar governing agriculture, navigation, and ritual. The mechanism made this connection operational. By turning the crank to a specific date, a user could not only see where the sun stood among the stars but also read, right there on the bronze plate, what that celestial alignment meant for the world below. This grounding in practical use is profoundly important. It tells us this was not a one-off royal toy or an obscure philosophical demonstration. It was a functional instrument built to be consulted, its readings trusted. The clarity of the instructions suggests a community of users, people trained to interpret its outputs. Yet, for all this intimate communication, the inscriptions hold onto one final, frustrating secret. They name celestial bodies and describe cycles, but they never record the names of the brilliant minds who conceived it or the master craftsmen who filed its tiny teeth. We hear the device's voice clearly, but the voices of its creators are still lost in the silence of history, a reminder that even our most direct links to the past can be beautifully, tragically incomplete. The inscriptions whisper in a distinct dialect of Greek, one that points us toward the workshop where this cosmic clock was born. The calendar it uses is not the official Athenian one, but a local system favored in the Corinthian colonies of the Eastern Mediterranean. The astronomical data encoded in its gears aligns perfectly with observations made from specific latitudes. All these subtle clues converge on a vibrant hub of trade, science, and engineering in the 2nd or 1st century before the Common Era, the island of Rhodes. This was a place where scholarship and craftsmanship met, home to a famous school of astronomy and a community of skilled metalworkers capable of such precision. And in Rhodes, we find a name that fits the puzzle with astonishing precision: the astronomer Hipparchus. He was the genius who first mathematically described the very lunar anomaly that the mechanism's pin and slot gear so elegantly simulates. He catalogued the stars and discovered the slow wobble of Earth's axis, called precession. The device's internal calculations seem to mirror his parameters, as if someone took his theoretical work and gave it physical, turning form. It is a tantalizing possibility that this machine is the lost working model of Hipparchus's revolutionary ideas, but Rhodes does not stand alone in this story. Another legendary name echoes from history: Archimedes of Syracuse. The Roman writer Cicero described with awe a celestial globe built by Archimedes, brought to Rome as war booty, a bronze sphere that showed the motions of the sun, moon, and planets. This was not a simple model. Cicero says it was a device where one could watch celestial events unfold with a turn of a handle. The description is uncannily familiar. While the Antikythera Mechanism is too late to have been made by Archimedes himself, it strongly suggests a living tradition, a school of thought and craft that he may have founded. His home, Syracuse, was another Corinthian colony, another center of advanced engineering. So did a disciple of Hipparchus build it, or an inheritor of Archimedes' methods. The truth may be that these were not separate streams, but part of a single, flowing river of Hellenistic genius. The mechanism feels less like a miraculous one-off and more like a surviving peak, the pinnacle of a known craft. It hints at a lost world of sophisticated devices, of geared astrolabes and hydraulic automata mentioned in ancient texts, most of which have crumbled to dust. Its lonely survival suggests a vibrant culture of mechanical philosophy, where understanding the cosmos meant not just contemplating it, but building it anew in bronze. So what was this magnificent machine actually for? Was it a tool for science, a guide for prophecy, or a wealthy man's conversation piece? The beautiful, challenging answer is that it was all of these things at once. In the Hellenistic world, these categories were not separate boxes. They were threads woven into a single tapestry of understanding. For a scholar like Hipparchus, this device would have been a revolutionary research instrument. Imagine testing a new theory about the moon's motion. Instead of performing pages of complex calculations, you could adjust a gear train, turn the crank, and watch your hypothesis play out in bronze, comparing its predictions against the night sky. It was a physical simulator, a way to model the cosmos and verify its mathematical rules. This makes it one of the earliest known analog computers in the truest sense, a machine for computing celestial answers. Yet that same predictive power held immense social and religious value. Eclipses were not just astronomical events, they were omens. The ability to forecast them, to know when the sun might darken, granted enormous authority. A temple priest using the mechanism could prepare rituals, advise rulers, and demonstrate a tangible connection to the divine order. The precise planetary positions it displayed were exactly what an astrologer needed to cast a detailed horoscope, linking an individual's fate to the specific celestial arrangement at their birth. For a wealthy patron, owning such a device was a symbol of supreme sophistication. It demonstrated not just riches, but a philosophical engagement with the universe's deepest mysteries. You could host a symposium, turn the handle, and show your guests the elegant clockwork of the heavens, a powerful statement about a rational, comprehensible cosmos. This lack of separation is key. The same gear that calculated the moon's position for scientific inquiry also pinpointed it for an astrological chart. The same dial that tracked the solar year for farming also scheduled sacred games. The mechanism did not distinguish between these uses because its creators saw no fundamental divide. To understand the stars was to understand fate, time, and divinity. This single object, therefore, embodies the Hellenistic spirit, a drive to comprehend the universe in all its aspects, and through sheer ingenuity, to build a machine that could hold that understanding in your hands. It represents a moment when humanity sought not just to observe the cosmic clock, but to build a working model of its very gears. The true scale of this achievement only becomes clear when we try to picture the hands that built it. Close your eyes and step into that imagined workshop. There is no hum of electric lathes, no digital calipers flashing precise numbers. The air smells of hot beeswax, charcoal, and molten metal. A master craftsman works by oil lamp and daylight, his world defined by the strength of his own vision and the steadiness of his own hand. His materials are simple: wax for models, clay for molds, copper and tin to be alloyed into bronze. His tools are fewer: hammers, chisels, and an array of hand files. Yet from this elemental workshop emerged an object of microscopic precision. The device is thought to contain between 30 and 70 individual bronze gears. Some of these gears are astonishingly small, with teeth numbering up to 223, each tooth likely filed by hand to a width of less than a millimeter. Consider for a moment what that means. To cut a gear with 223 teeth, you must first lay out those divisions on a tiny bronze disc with perfect accuracy. A single error in spacing, one tooth filed a hair too wide or too narrow, and the entire gear train would bind, jamming the cosmic model. This was geometry made physical, astronomy translated into tangible, interlocking motion. The alloy itself was a secret recipe, a specific blend of copper and tin that had to be strong enough to withstand turning forces, yet soft enough to be worked with hand tools. Each gear began as a wax model, was encased in clay to form a mold, then cast in molten bronze. Once cooled, the rough casting was painstakingly filed down to its final, perfect form. The assembly was a three-dimensional puzzle of axles, pins, and plates, all fitting together with tolerances we would measure in fractions of a millimeter today. There were no blueprints as we know them, no interchangeable parts. This was not mass production, it was bespoke, artisanal engineering at the absolute highest level. It required a mind that could hold complex astronomical cycles in one thought and the practical mechanics of gear ratios in another. The maker was not just a metalsmith or a mathematician, he was both, a synthesis of skills that seems anachronistically advanced. This level of integrated genius points not to a lone inventor, but to a lost school of technical thought, a tradition where crafting the cosmos in bronze was the ultimate expression of understanding it. To hold even a replica of one of those tiny gears is to feel the ghost of that tradition, a whisper of how much more they might have built and how tragically little has survived. The gears may have been crafted by Greek hands, but the celestial rhythms they calculated were far older. the very heartbeats of the mechanism, the Saros and Metonic cycles it tracked so meticulously, were not discoveries of the Greek world. They were the legacy of another, even more ancient civilization of astronomers, the Babylonians. For centuries, scribes in Mesopotamia had meticulously recorded the movements of the planets on clay tablets, building up an unparalleled archive of empirical data. They were not seeking geometric theories of the cosmos. They were practical observers, tracking patterns for calendrical and astrological purposes. From this mountain of data, they extracted the repeating cycles that governed eclipses and harmonized the sun and moon. This was raw, powerful knowledge, the product of relentless observation. The Greek genius lay not in the initial discovery of these cycles, but in what they chose to do with them. They took this Eastern treasury of numbers and patterns and asked a different kind of question. Instead of simply recording the cycles, could they build a machine that physically performed them? Could they translate columns of cuneiform numbers into the elegant, turning motion of interlocking bronze gears? This is the profound synthesis at the core of the Antikythera Mechanism. It represents a monumental meeting of two great intellectual traditions. From the East came centuries of precise, empirical data. From the Greek world came a passion for geometric models and mechanical philosophy. The mechanism is the tangible offspring of that union. It is one of history's first great integrations of knowledge, a cross-cultural collaboration across time and space. The Babylonian astronomers provided the celestial map, and the Greek engineers built the vehicle to travel its routes. This synthesis defines the Hellenistic age, a period of unprecedented exchange following the conquests of Alexander the Great. Ideas, along with goods and people, flowed freely from the Indus Valley to the shores of the Mediterranean. A scholar in Rhodes could have access to Babylonian eclipse records, Egyptian calendar systems, and Greek theoretical texts, all within a single library. The mechanism is the ultimate symbol of that connected world. It is not a purely Greek invention, but a cosmopolitan one. Its genius is hybrid, taking the best of multiple ancient sciences and forging them into something entirely new. This reframes the device from a mysterious anomaly into a logical product of its time, the pinnacle of a globalized ancient science. It prompts us to wonder what other conversations between cultures, now lost to us, were once encoded not in fragile scrolls but in the durable language of engineering. This single surviving whisper leaves us with a profound and haunting question. If the Greeks could build something this advanced, why have we found only one? The Antikythera Mechanism stands in a museum case as a stunning outlier, a ghost from a timeline that seems to have vanished. Its isolation is the central puzzle that forces us to look not just at the object, but at the fragile nature of history itself. The first and most practical reason is simply one of material survival. The device is made of bronze, a valuable alloy. In times of conflict or economic hardship, bronze objects were some of the first things to be melted down for weapons or coinage. A sophisticated astronomical computer would be worthless to a soldier or a smelter, just so much metal to be recycled. The delicate gears and plates, along with the wooden case that housed them, are also highly vulnerable to decay. Organic materials like wood and papyrus instructions simply rot away, leaving behind only the most durable metal core, and even that corrodes into an unrecognizable lump over centuries underwater or buried in soil. So the physical odds were always stacked against such a device lasting 2,000 years. Then we must consider the scale of production. This was not a product from an assembly line. It was an exquisite, bespoke instrument, likely requiring hundreds of hours from master artisans and scholars. They were probably made in tiny numbers, only for the wealthiest patrons, the most prestigious temples, or the greatest royal libraries. We are not looking for a lost mass production, but for a handful of elite masterpieces scattered across the ancient Mediterranean. The survival of even one is against tremendous odds. But the mystery goes deeper than just physical loss. The true silencing of this technology may have been intellectual and social. The world that created the mechanism was the vibrant, questioning, and interconnected Hellenistic era. This was followed by the rise of the Roman Empire, a civilization of magnificent engineers, but with a different focus: aqueducts, roads, and monumental architecture, rather than intricate models of the cosmos. The Roman approach was often more practical, and the deep, theoretical Greek science that powered devices like the Antikythera Mechanism may have become a niche interest preserved by only a few scholars. Then came an even more profound shift: the gradual dominance of Christianity across the former Roman world. In this new cultural landscape, a device that so perfectly embodied a pagan, clockwork universe could be viewed with deep suspicion. Its purpose of predicting eclipses, which could be seen as divination, and its embodiment of a non-Christian cosmology, might have condemned it as a dangerous or heretical object. The knowledge required to build and maintain it, passed down in small schools of thought, could have been actively suppressed or simply faded away as irrelevant to the new worldview. Libraries holding key texts burned or molded. Workshops with their specialized tools were abandoned. The conversation about building the cosmos in bronze was abruptly silenced. So the mechanism is not just a lone survivor of a technology. It is a lone survivor of an entire way of thinking. Its ghostly presence in our history is a reminder of how fragile the thread of knowledge can be, and how entire chapters of human ingenuity can vanish, leaving behind only a single, corroded clue to whisper of what was once possible. The silence of the archaeological record is broken by voices from the past. While the Antikythera Mechanism sits alone in its glass case, ancient texts speak of other wonders, suggesting it was not a solitary genius but a star in a forgotten constellation. The Roman statesman Cicero, writing in the 1st century before the Common Era, described with awe a bronze sphere built by Archimedes. This was no simple globe, but a device that captured the motions of the sun, moon, and 5 known planets with such accuracy that it could demonstrate eclipses. Cicero had seen it himself, a trophy of war displayed in Rome. His account is not a myth, it is a first-hand report of a lost masterpiece, a close cousin to our mechanism from Syracuse. Then, centuries later in Alexandria, the engineer Hero described entire automated theaters, where miniature plays unfolded through the clever use of weights, strings, and steam. His devices were powered by simple principles, but their ambition was vast, creating illusions of life and narrative through pure mechanics. These were not toys, they were demonstrations of philosophical principles about nature and motion, crafted to inspire wonder and understanding. This thread of knowledge, though stretched thin, did not completely snap. As the center of learning shifted eastward, Byzantine and Arab scholars and craftsmen became the new keepers of ancient mechanical wisdom. In the 12th century, the brilliant engineer Ismail al-Jazari, working in what is now Turkey, compiled his book of knowledge of ingenious mechanical devices. Within its pages are designs for elaborate water clocks, musical automata, and most strikingly, his monumental castle clock. This was a complex timekeeping machine over 3 meters tall, featuring moving zodiac signs, solar and lunar pointers, and even automated musicians that would play at the hour. It was a public spectacle of celestial engineering, a direct descendant in spirit, if not in precise gearing, of the tradition that produced the Antikythera Mechanism. These scattered references, from Cicero's recollection to al-Jazari's blueprints, form a fragile bridge across the Dark Ages. They tell us that the knowledge of building complex models of the cosmos did not vanish in a single shipwreck. It was preserved, translated, adapted, and reinvented, flickering like a lamp passed from hand to hand through libraries, workshops, and palaces. The Antikythera device, therefore, is our one tangible piece of evidence for a much larger story, a story written mostly on perishable parchment and in fragile oral traditions. It anchors these textual ghosts in physical reality. We are left with a profound realization that what we call the history of technology is often just the history of what happened to survive. For every bronze computer that rests on a museum shelf, how many others were melted down for coins or left to crumble in forgotten cellars, their secrets dissolving into rust and silence? That lonely, corroded whisper from the Aegean forces us to confront a vast and silent chasm in our historical memory. For over 1,000 years in Europe, the intricate mechanical philosophy that built the Antikythera Mechanism simply vanished from the record. This period, stretching from the fragmentation of the Roman Empire to the dawn of the Renaissance, represents a profound technological gap. The gears of cosmic understanding, so finely cut in ancient Greece, seemed to stop turning in the West. It was not a time without innovation, but the specific art of constructing complex, geared models of the universe faded into obscurity, its principles forgotten, its very possibility dismissed. This disappearance challenges our most comfortable assumption about history, the idea of steady, linear progress. Instead, it reveals a story of fragmentation, where brilliant knowledge can be scattered like pages from a burned book. While Europe navigated this long interlude, the flame of this precise mechanical tradition was carried and brilliantly fueled elsewhere. In the vibrant scholarly centers of the Islamic world, from Baghdad to Damascus to Cordoba, the legacy of Greek and Hellenistic science was not just preserved, it was actively advanced. Astronomers and engineers studied translated texts, refined astronomical tables, and directed their skills toward a beautiful and practical purpose, the creation of sophisticated timekeeping and observational instruments. They built elaborate astrolabes for mapping the stars, and most significantly, they engineered monumental water clocks and geared astronomical devices that displayed the hours, the phases of the moon, and the movements of planets. These were public marvels like the grand clock gifted to Charlemagne by the Caliph Harun al-Rashid, which marked the hours with mechanical nights and falling brass balls. This continuum of craftsmanship in the Islamic world formed an unbroken bridge across the medieval gap, proving that the knowledge required to build such complexity never truly left the human toolkit. It was merely geographically and culturally relocated for centuries. The re-emergence of similar mechanical ambition in Europe was a slow dawn. It began not with portable computers, but with monumental public declarations of faith and civic pride, the great cathedral clocks of the 14th century. The most famous of these, the Prague astronomical clock built in 1410, stands as a powerful echo from across the millennia. Like the Antikythera Mechanism, it displays a cosmic panorama, showing the positions of the sun and moon, the zodiac, and even a calendar dial. But the comparison is deeply revealing. The Prague clock is a towering, magnificent achievement of its age, yet its internal gearing, while complex, is arguably less sophisticated in its pure astronomical calculations than the ancient Greek device. It represents a magnificent, independent rediscovery of a goal to model the heavens in motion, but it arrived at that goal over 1,000 years later, and by a different path of technical reasoning. This gap, this long detour in the journey of an idea, is what makes the Antikythera Mechanism so profoundly disruptive. It sits there in its case as a benchmark, a marker of a peak that was reached, abandoned, and whose trail was completely overgrown. The story is not one of simple loss, but of the fragile ecology of knowledge itself. It shows how expertise depends on specific cultural conditions, on patronage, on the unbroken transmission of craft from master to apprentice, and on a society that values a particular kind of question. When those conditions change, the knowledge can become dormant, waiting to be independently reconceived by a future generation that believes it is inventing something entirely new. The mechanism forces us to ask, what other peaks have we climbed in the past, only to descend and forget the route entirely, leaving future explorers to believe the summit had never been touched. The silence of the corroded fragments was finally broken, not by a whisper but by the precise click of a recreated gear. To truly understand the mechanism, you cannot just study its remains, you must bring it back to life. This is the monumental task undertaken by a unique group of modern detectives, part historians, part engineers, who dared to rebuild the ancient computer from its digital ghost. British Museum curator Michael Wright spent decades crafting a physical reconstruction, painstakingly cutting each gear by hand based on Derek de Solla Price's early X-ray models. His working model was a revelation, proving the device could physically function with the complex motions the scans suggested. Later, the team from the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki and the University of Cardiff created their own stunningly accurate model, known as the Antikythera Mechanism Research Project Replica. They used modern manufacturing techniques like laser cutting to achieve the microscopic precision the original artisans managed with files, a fascinating blend of ancient design and 21st century fabrication. Perhaps the most poetic reconstruction came from hobbyist and clockmaker John Gleave, who built the first fully functional model to be displayed in a public planetarium. His version, with its transparent plates, allows you to see every gear train in motion, a beautiful turning anatomy lesson of an ancient mind. The process of building these models is a profound act of reverse engineering. Researchers start with the ghostly CT scan data, a three-dimensional map of what survives, but the mechanism is incomplete, with perhaps a third of its original gears missing. To fill these gaps, they must think like the original engineers. They apply pure mathematical logic, asking what gear ratios are needed to produce the known outputs, the Saros and Metonic cycles, on the dials. It becomes a puzzle of celestial arithmetic, where the only correct solution is one that fits both the physical space inside the wooden case and the astronomical truths of the ancient world. The moment of truth for any reconstruction is the first full turn of the crank. If the mathematics and the craftsmanship are correct, something magical happens. The pointers on the front dial begin their slow dance. The moon hand subtly speeds up and slows down, tracing its elegant anomaly. The tiny ball representing the moon rotates through its phases. On the back, the pointers creep along their spiral tracks, marking the inexorable march toward an eclipse that would have been viewed as an omen 2,000 years ago. That first synchronized movement is more than just a technical success, it is a bridge across time. These reconstructions are not mere replicas, they are active experiments in ancient thought. They prove beyond any doubt that the design was not a theoretical sketch on papyrus, but a brilliantly practical, functional machine. Every click of a recreated gear is a confirmation of an ancient engineer's intent, a physical answer to a question we thought was lost. To stand before one of these working models, to reach out and turn the handle yourself, is an experience that defies description. You are not just looking at history, you are operating it. You feel the slight resistance of the gears, you watch the cosmos unfold at your command, and for a fleeting moment, you hold a piece of reanimated genius in your hands, closing a circle that the sea had left open for 2 millennia. That final turn of the crank brings us face to face with a startling question. What exactly are we looking at? Is this a clock, a calculator, or something more profound? To call the Antikythera mechanism a computer is not a modern exaggeration. It is a precise technical classification, but one that requires us to step back and define our terms. In its purest form, a computer is simply something that computes. It performs calculations. Today, we associate that word with silicon chips and digital code, but for most of human history, computation was a physical act. An analog computer, like the mechanism, does not use ones and zeros. Instead, it creates a physical analogy. It builds one system whose behavior directly mirrors or models the behavior of another, more complex system. In this case, the system being modeled is the cosmos itself. The gear trains do not contain data, they are the data. The mathematical relationships discovered by Babylonian astronomers and Greek geometers, the ratios of the Saros and Metonic cycles, are not stored in memory. They are permanently cast into the diameters and tooth counts of the bronze wheels. When you turn the input crank, you are not retrieving a stored answer. You are physically enacting the celestial mathematics. The rotation of the gears is the computation. The pointer's position on the Eclipse dial is the output. It is a machine that transforms the abstract concept of time and planetary motion into a visible, tangible result through an unbroken chain of mechanical cause and effect. This stands in elegant contrast to our modern digital computers, which are programmable and general purpose. They follow explicit, changeable instructions to manipulate symbols. The ancient device is fixed, dedicated to a single, magnificent task. It cannot play a game or send a message, yet both share the same core ambition: to automate complex calculation and reveal patterns that are difficult or impossible for the human mind to work out in real time. By this definition, the mechanism is unquestionably a computer, and arguably the world's oldest surviving example of a sophisticated analog computer. This reframing is crucial. It moves the device from the category of ingenious ancient curiosities and places it squarely at the very foundation of the history of computation. It shows that the driving impulse to build machines that model our world, to externalize our intelligence into gearwork or circuitry, is not a product of the Silicon Age. It is a deeply human urge stretching back at least 2,000 years. The engineers of Rhodes were not just telling time, they were building a tiny, turning universe to think with. Their creation whispers that the lineage of the computer does not begin with Babbage or Turing in the 19th century, but in the Hellenistic workshops where astronomy and craftsmanship fused into a new form of knowing. This realization makes the mechanism not a dead end, but a starting point, a prototype for a way of thinking that would be lost, only to be rediscovered again and again across the centuries. The Antikythera Mechanism shatters the mirror in which we view our own technological past. Our standard narrative of progress is a comforting story of linear ascent, a steady climb from primitive tools to the Silicon Age, with key milestones like the printing press, the steam engine, and the computer marking a clear upward path. This device, sitting squarely in the 2nd century before the Common Era, disrupts that entire timeline. It forces a profound and humbling realization. The peak of a technological mountain does not guarantee a permanent base camp for the next ascent. A civilization can reach a staggering height of sophistication in one specific domain, only for that knowledge to later crumble, leaving the summit shrouded in mist for future explorers who believe they are the first to climb it. The traditional birth of complex scientific instrumentation is placed firmly in the European Renaissance, with the elaborate astrolabes and early telescopes of figures like Galileo. The mechanism pushes that origin story back by over 1,500 years. It reveals a Hellenistic world not just of abstract philosophers, but of workshops where advanced mathematical theory was translated directly into precision bronze machinery. This was not merely craftsmanship, it was integrated engineering, a seamless fusion of cosmic observation, geometric calculation, and mechanical design. The path of advancement, therefore, is not a smooth, ever-rising curve. It is a jagged, broken line full of sudden peaks and devastating troughs. Think of it like a library that burns down. The collective knowledge of that library, the specific ways of thinking and making represented by texts and tools, is lost. A new society may eventually build a grander library, but it will contain different books assembled from different fragments. They may reinvent the wheel, but they will not have the original blueprints for the geared computer that once sat on its shelves. This pattern challenges a deep-seated hubris about modern superiority. We often assume that because we have digital technology, we are inherently more advanced in all ways. But the mechanism asks a pointed question: are we more advanced, or are we simply advanced in different directions? The ancient engineers of Rhodes possessed a holistic genius we have largely specialized away from. The individual who conceived the device likely held the roles of astronomer, mathematician, and master machinist in one mind. Today, those fields are separate disciplines requiring years of specialized training. Their achievement stands as a monument to a different kind of intellectual synthesis, one that could visualize the cosmos and then build a working model of it from first principles using hand tools. This is not to say we have not progressed, but to highlight that progress is not a single, monolithic force. It is a collection of threads, and threads can be cut. The mechanism's lonely survival is the ultimate testament to the fragility of knowledge. It reminds us that our technological civilization is not an inevitable endpoint, but a delicate, ongoing conversation. It depends on the unbroken transmission of skills, on cultural values that support certain kinds of inquiry, and on the sheer luck of material preservation. For over a millennium, the very idea that such a device could have existed was considered impossible, a fantasy contradicting the historical record. That record we now see was merely a record of what survived. The silent presence of this bronze computer in a museum case is a permanent question mark etched against our assumptions. It whispers that other peaks may have been reached and lost, their secrets waiting not in some undiscovered tomb, but dissolved into the rust and soil of time, leaving us to walk in the valleys below, unaware of the heights our ancestors once attained. Even with its gears now mapped and its functions revealed, the mechanism guards a final layer of secrets. Decades of intense study have answered the big questions, but a constellation of smaller, fascinating puzzles still glimmers unresolved. These are not gaps in our knowledge so much as invitations, beckoning future detectives to look closer. One of the most significant debates centers on the device's ultimate ambition. Did it model only the sun and moon, or did it include the 5 wandering stars, the planets known to the ancients? Recent analysis of the fragmented plates and gear trains suggests a strong possibility. Researchers like Michael Wright and the Antikythera Mechanism research project team have proposed reconstructions that include intricate, nested gearing for Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These planetary mechanisms would have been staggeringly complex, using epicyclic gears to replicate the planet's occasional backward loops or retrograde motion against the stars. If correct, this transforms the device from a brilliant lunar solar calculator into a complete miniature cosmos, a true analog of the known universe. The evidence is tantalizing but fragmentary. A ghost of a gear train here, a suggestive inscription there. Proving it conclusively may require the discovery of new fragments or even an entirely new device. Beyond the grand spectacle of planets, the purpose of several smaller, subsidiary dials remains a topic of quiet debate. One, often called the Games Dial, likely indexed the cycle of major Panhellenic athletic festivals like the Olympics. Another may have been a simple day counter, but their exact labeling and full integration into the machine's logic are still being deciphered, word by tiny word from the corroded bronze. Then there is the human mystery. We know it was made, but we do not know for whom. Was it commissioned by a wealthy Roman collector fascinated by Greek science, a trophy of conquest being shipped home? Or was it the prized possession of a traveling scholar or a temple academy, a working tool for ritual and prophecy? The mechanism itself is silent on its owner, a nameless masterpiece. This leads to the most tantalizing question of all. Is the Antikythera Mechanism truly alone? The ship that carried it was a floating treasury, and only a portion of the wreck has been excavated. Could other fragments of this same device, or even parts of a second, lie buried under the seabed silt? More broadly, if this was a product of a known technical tradition, as the evidence suggests, then other examples must have been built. Could a similar device be waiting in a forgotten crate in a museum basement, mislabeled as a piece of unidentifiable scrap? Or might another lie undiscovered in a different shipwreck, somewhere along the ancient trade routes between Alexandria, Rhodes, and Rome? These open questions are what keep the story vibrantly alive. They mean the chapter on the Antikythera Mechanism is not closed. Every new imaging technology, every fresh look at the data, every dive on the wreck site offers a chance to add another sentence. It transforms the device from a static artifact into a living conversation across time, a puzzle that continues to engage not just historians and engineers, but anyone captivated by the idea that our past still holds surprises, waiting for the right moment and the right curious mind to reveal them. The deep blue silence of the Mediterranean floor is no longer an impenetrable barrier. For over a century, the Antikythera wreck lay mostly undisturbed, its secrets guarded by depth and danger. But today, a new era of exploration has begun, one that holds the electrifying promise of finding the mechanism's lost siblings. Underwater archaeology has evolved from the sponge diver's daring plunge into a sophisticated technological discipline. Modern expeditions to the site now employ a breathtaking arsenal of tools. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, glide silently through the dark, their high-definition cameras and robotic arms extending the reach of researchers on the surface. Even more astonishing are the exosuit systems, wearable submarines that allow an archaeologist to descend to 60 meters and work with their own hands for hours, without the risk of decompression sickness that crippled the original salvage team. These suits transform a human into an aquanaut, able to sift through sediment with a gentle touch. This advanced toolkit has already yielded spectacular results. Recent dives have recovered a bronze spear, a finely carved marble head, and even the skeleton of a passenger, offering a poignant personal connection to the tragedy. Most intriguingly, they have located a second, separate cargo area of the ship, suggesting the wreck is far larger and richer than anyone imagined. Every artifact recovered is a data point, but the true hope lies in finding another lump of corroded gears. The Mediterranean is a vast museum of sunken history. The sea lanes between Greece, Asia Minor, and Italy were the superhighways of the ancient world, bustling with thousands of ships carrying art, wine, spices, and people. Storms, wars, and simple misfortune sent many to the bottom. We know of other spectacular wrecks, like the one at Modia off Tunisia, which carried a similar cargo of Greek art to Rome. Each undiscovered wreck is a potential time capsule. Given the mechanism's likely origin in a center like Rhodes, it is statistically almost impossible that it was the only one of its kind ever made. Others must have been commissioned, gifted, or looted. The question is not if they were built, but whether any survived the twin ravages of the sea and the smelter's furnace. A single discovery of a similar device would be a historical earthquake. It would instantly transform the Antikythera Mechanism from a miraculous outlier into a representative of a known class of objects. We could compare designs, see variations, and understand the evolution of this technology. It would fill the lonely silence with conversation, proving a continuous tradition of cosmic engineering. This is the powerful allure of underwater archaeology. It is a field built on patience, technology, and a profound respect for context. Unlike a tomb robbed in antiquity, a shipwreck freezes a moment in time, a single voyage with all its cargo intact. Finding another mechanism would not just give us a second device, it would give us the company it kept, perhaps even the scrolls of its accompanying scholar, offering the instruction manual we so desperately lack. The search is a grand synthesis, blending the historian's questions with the engineer's tools and the explorer's spirit. Every sweep of a sonar array, every careful sifting of sediment, is driven by that compelling hope to find a companion for the world's oldest computer, and finally hear the full story its solitary gears have been trying to tell us for 2,000 years. This journey from a corroded lump to a reconstructed marvel has not stayed within museum walls or academic journals. The Antikythera Mechanism has made a spectacular leap into the heart of modern popular culture, becoming a true icon of mystery. It is a star of major documentary series, a plot device in best-selling novels, and a coveted artifact in blockbuster video games. In these digital worlds, it often appears as the ultimate relic of a lost, advanced civilization, a key to unlocking secrets or powering fantastical machines. This widespread fascination is deeply revealing. The mechanism taps directly into the same sense of wonder that fuels stories of ancient astronauts or Atlantis, but with one crucial, empowering difference. It requires no aliens, no divine intervention, no outside help. Its entire magic is human. It proves that the genius for breathtaking technological leaps existed right here 2,000 years ago in workshops lit by oil lamps. This fact is perhaps more thrilling than any fiction. It satisfies our longing for a hidden, smarter past while grounding that wonder in the tangible reality of bronze gears and astronomical math. The device has become a powerful symbol for a very modern idea that history is not a closed book but a living puzzle. It represents the thrilling possibility that our understanding of the past is always provisional, always one discovery away from being completely rewritten. Every time it appears in a game or a film, it reinforces a potent narrative that the ancients might have known things we have forgotten, that peaks of knowledge can be lost to time. This cultural embrace transforms the mechanism from a Greek artifact into a global story. It speaks to anyone who has ever looked at an old map and wondered about the blank spaces, or considered how much of our own digital world might one day become just as mysterious. Its quiet presence in our entertainment is a constant, subtle reminder that the boundary between myth and history is porous, and that the next great discovery might not be on a new planet, but waiting in the silt of our own world, ready to turn everything we think we know on its head. That single, silent computer from the deep offers a lesson far greater than the sum of its bronze parts. It asks us to reconsider one of our most cherished modern stories, the myth of linear, inevitable progress. We often envision history as a smooth, upward slope, where each generation builds directly upon the last, moving steadily from primitive tools to smartphones. The mechanism shatters that comforting illusion. It reveals a landscape of jagged peaks and deep valleys where advanced knowledge can be attained, celebrated, and then utterly forgotten. This device did not emerge from a vacuum. It was the product of a very specific and fertile ecosystem, the competitive, intellectually vibrant world of the Hellenistic kingdoms after Alexander. In places like Rhodes and Alexandria, rulers vied for prestige by sponsoring great libraries and attracting brilliant minds. There was a culture that valued both deep astronomical theory and exquisite mechanical craft, and saw them as part of the same noble pursuit. This environment allowed the mechanism to be conceived and built, but that ecosystem was fragile. The Roman conquest shifted political and cultural priorities. The rise of new religious worldviews changed the questions society found important. The supporting institutions, the schools and workshops that passed this specialized knowledge from master to apprentice, gradually faded. The library at Alexandria suffered its famous losses. The precise art of crafting cosmic gearwork, lacking royal patrons and a clear social purpose, simply withered away. It was not bombed into oblivion, it was neglected into silence. This is the mechanism's humbling whisper to our own age. our dazzling technological civilization is not the final, inevitable pinnacle of human achievement. It is simply our point on that long and winding road. We too depend on a fragile ecosystem, on universities, research funding, open exchange of ideas, and the meticulous preservation of data. We assume our knowledge is permanent, stored in the cloud, but digital formats become obsolete, hard drives fail, and the context to understand complex systems can evaporate in a single generation if we are not vigilant. The lesson is not that we will forget how to build a smartphone, but that we might forget why we built it in a certain way, or lose the deeper principles that made it possible. The mechanism urges us to value not just the creation of knowledge, but its active stewardship. It asks us to appreciate diverse forms of understanding, from the theoretical to the artisanal, recognizing that true innovation often lies in the spaces where they connect. Most of all, it teaches a profound humility. That corroded lump in Athens is a monument to a peak we once climbed, whose path we lost. It is a permanent reminder that no summit is guaranteed, and that the most important thing we can build for the future is not just a better machine, but a society resilient enough to remember how it was made. The gears of Antikythera did not stop turning with the shipwreck. Their conceptual echoes resonated through centuries, finding new forms in the machines of a much later age. The mechanism's core principle, using physical movement to model complex mathematical relationships, became the foundation of a whole field known as analog computation. In the 1930s and 40s, before the digital revolution, engineers built room-sized machines called differential analyzers. These were vast assemblies of rotating shafts, gears, and disks designed to solve intricate equations for ballistics, electrical networks, and even the stresses on aircraft wings. They were the Antikythera Mechanism's spiritual descendants, solving problems not with binary code, but with the tangible interaction of mechanical parts, a direct lineage of turning one system into a physical analogy for another. This tradition bridged the gap until the first electronic computers rendered them obsolete, completing a cycle that began with modeling the cosmos in bronze. In the silent watch of modern astronomy, the legacy is even more direct. Every satellite launch, every deep space probe trajectory, relies on supremely accurate tables predicting the positions of celestial bodies, known as an ephemeris. These calculations are the digital offspring of the cycles tracked on the mechanism's spirals. While our equations are far more complex, accounting for relativity and gravitational nudges from countless objects, the fundamental goal is identical: to know precisely where the moon, sun, and planets will be at a future moment. The ancient device computed this with geared cycles of 19 and 223 months. Our supercomputers run algorithms solving gravitational equations. The medium changed from bronze to silicon, but the human imperative to forecast the heavens remained utterly unchanged. It is a continuous thread of curiosity, woven from Greek bronze into lines of computer code. Ultimately, the mechanism stands as a timeless monument to a specific kind of human magic, the drive to build a small world that helps us understand the large one. The Greeks crafted a portable cosmos from gears and dials. Today, we fulfill that same urge with planetarium software that projects the night sky onto a dome, or with vast supercomputer simulations that model the birth of galaxies or the Earth's climate. These are our Antikythera mechanisms, infinitely more powerful, yet born from the same foundational impulse. We still seek to hold the universe in our hands, to manipulate it, to see its patterns unfold at our command. The device links the intellectual ambition of an ancient workshop directly to the glowing screens of our laboratories. It reminds us that our most advanced tools are not a break from history, but the latest expression of a very old conversation, a conversation that began when someone first looked at the stars and wondered if they could build a machine that moved in time with their eternal dance. That lonely, corroded computer from the Aegean is more than an artifact. It is a question cast in bronze. It asks us to look at the silent gaps in our history books and wonder what else has been lost to time, to fire, and to the deep sea. The mechanism forces a quiet revolution in how we see the ancient Greeks. They were not just the philosophers contemplating the stars from a hilltop or the artists carving perfect marble. They were consummate engineers who dared to build a working model of their cosmos. They took their profound understanding of mathematics and celestial cycles and translated it into the tangible language of interlocking gears, creating a machine that could compute the future dance of the heavens. Its intricate dials tracked time, its brilliant gearing simulated cosmic irregularity, and its predictive power offered a glimpse into the orderly mind of the universe as they understood it. This single device redefines an entire civilization, revealing a strand of technological genius woven directly into the fabric of their intellectual pursuit. It stands as a permanent reminder that human ingenuity has flashed with incredible brightness at different times and in different places, often leaving behind only the faintest echo. The story of the Antikythera Mechanism is an invitation to embrace curiosity over assumption. It teaches us that the past is not a settled record but a living mystery, and that our greatest discoveries often come from listening to the whispers of what has survived and daring to imagine all that has not. If this journey into a lost chapter of history has sparked your curiosity, subscribe for more explorations into the forgotten wonders of our world. Let us know in the comments, what other ancient technologies or lost inventions do you believe are still waiting, silent and patient, for their moment of rediscovery?